Hello, everyone, and welcome to another conversation with Age in Spain. I hope you are all having a great summer so far and you're not depressed by September coming in tomorrow. The session today, here, Brad is with me. He will be driving the session with me, talking about the topics. Our session today will focus on residency and most importantly on a topic that has been requested and we've received a ton of inquiries asking for them, which is, can my family members come live with Spain with me if I am a resident, if I am a family member of an EU national, etc. Several conditions, right? So pretty much today through the session we will go through different scenarios where a UK national can or bring the family members to Spain or become a resident under certain conditions. And yeah, I think without further ado, we can maybe briefly mention just the different types of possibilities that we can find. The first one is, of course, being a family member of an EU national. The second one is UK nationals under the scope of the withdrawal agreement being able to bring other UK nationals that are family members from the UK, for example, to Spain. The third option is how to bring your partner if your partner is a third country national. And finally, we will briefly mention as well what are the options for all those UK nationals who are not under the scope of the withdrawal agreement. Okay, Brad, with this introduction, I leave it to you.
Cool. Thanks so much, Mark. And yeah, like you said, it's been a hot topic, particularly now as we're getting further and further away from the end of the transition period, and a lot of people already have their residency, or they're waiting for their TIEs, and they're starting to think about the future and their family members, and particularly for those people who have older parents. Um, or kind of older relatives, and they need to start thinking about like kind of care options for them and looking after them, and the way things are going to happen in later life as well. It's quite it's quite an important topic for a lot of people. So one of the um, so basically, just to start off with, as we all know, as we've said before, anybody that's not an EU citizen, an EU resident, or a valid visa holder, they can only stay in the Schengen zone for 90 days in a 180-day period. Okay, so even if you're a resident and your family members come over to visit you, if they want to stay longer than that 90 days in a 180-day period, then they do need to apply for residency or a visa, so that they're able to kind of like stay here. And it's actually possible, obviously depending on your circumstances and situations. But there's potential to bring a family member over if you yourself are a Spanish resident, or even potentially a Spanish visa holder as well. Okay, and this is one of the things that the British government negotiated with the EU as a part of the withdrawal agreement, and that was one of the things that you do have the right to bring family members over to live with you in the EU country where you're resident. Um, Obviously, there's some guidelines to this, regarding which family members you can bring over, like how you prove different things. Um, and they obviously still have to meet the requirements to be residency in Spain as well. But yeah, it's one of the important things, that the rights that are guaranteed under the withdrawal agreement. So yeah, so it's quite good.
Thank you, Brad. So, what are the options that a UK national would look at? Of course, we will go through different scenarios, different situations, but let's say, for example, a UK national is married, for example, to an EU national. What are the options here?
Cool. So there's something which is called the EU Family Member Card. Um, so this no longer applies to British people. So if you're a Spanish resident and you're British, you're not an EU national anymore, so you can't apply for the EU family member card. But if you're married to, or you have a family member relationship with someone else who is an EU national, um, then you have the option to apply for the EU family member card. And this is particularly interesting for the people who we've seen a lot who maybe a British national applied for residency. They didn't meet the requirements, they were rejected, but they have a Spanish partner, Spanish spouse, or they're in a relationship with someone that's from a different EU country as well. So we're seeing a lot of people who were declined in their own right, but are able to access the EU family member card based on their relationship with an EU national. And we'll go into it a little bit more later on about exactly what specifications of those relationships are.
Thank you very much. So, as Brad said, sadly, this is not anymore a route where you can bring other family members to Spain as it used to be back before 2020 when UK nationals were considered nationals, but it is still a path you can follow if you want to get residency and even an EU family card, which certainly gives even more privileges than a normal TA would. Let's go to UK relationships then. What are the options there? What happens if a UK national is a resident under the withdrawal agreement, has been living in Spain for the past 5 years, let's say, and their partner, due to work reasons, lived abroad and never became a resident? Could they now reunite in Spain and become residents? Both?
Yeah, exactly. So as long as one family member is a Spanish resident, and they were before the end of the transition period, so they're covered by the withdrawal agreement, then they can bring a family member over. So the types of family members you can bring over as part of this is uh, like a married spouse, a partner, and we'll go into a bit more detail later about exactly what that means. Children, grandchildren, and parents or grandparents as well. So um, depending on where the family member, which country they're a citizen of, and which country they hold citizenship for, there's two slightly different processes. But the important thing is that the UK national is resident in Spain and is a recipient of the withdrawal agreement. And then they can bring their family members over, and it doesn't matter if they're from the UK or if they're from another country outside of the EU. But yeah, like I said, the process is just slightly different, and we'll go into it in a little bit more detail later on.
Yeah, because now that you mentioned that, it's true. Like here we were talking about two family members that are both from the UK. One is under the scope of the withdrawal agreement. Therefore, the other one becomes also under the scope, eligible for this special tier that is not anymore obtainable if someone is coming in 2021 and has no family member, he never lived in Spain before. But you also mentioned that it is possible for a third country national who is neither from the UK or the EU, European Economic Area or Switzerland, to be under the scope of the withdrawal agreement, right? They can get their residency as family members.
Yeah, exactly. So it's based on the fact that the UK national holds residency in Spain, and yeah, as we mentioned before, under the withdrawal agreement, one of those rights that were maintained was to bring a family member over. So yeah, it doesn't matter if they're from the UK or from a different country. Yeah, they still have to meet the requirements for residency, but you have the possibility of bringing them over.
That sounds great. Just a brief interruption here. Thank you everyone for watching. We're really happy to see people engaging. So if you have any questions regarding residency, regarding bringing your family members, you have specific situations that you're unsure how the administration would act on them, please leave a comment because we will read them and we will respond to all the questions that we receive. So do not hesitate writing there. And when we finish our session, we will go through each of them and we will probably give you the answer. Um, so, yeah. Now, moving forward, there is one last category, right? That we will not talk too much about in today's session because we have another session planned. But this a category that comprises all those UK nationals that are not under the scope of the withdrawal agreement. Not being under the scope of the withdrawal agreement, which means that you were not living in Spain before 2020 or you couldn't prove in any way to the immigration office that you were living in Spain before the end of 2020, which it's something important to observe. The game's not over yet. There is another regime where you can go through and you can apply for residency. However, is way more strict. It's called the Régimen General, which encompasses all third countries. All third countries need to go through this regime. And this regime also contemplates the option of bringing over family members once you've become a resident. However, the conditions, as I said before, are way stricter and way more difficult. So maybe later we'll talk, but the main focus of today's session will be the other processes that Brad mentioned. So Brad, what else you have to say about bringing family members? What's the process? What the documents that we may need, etc.
So I already mentioned before some of the types of family members that you can bring over. But I think I'll just go into it like in a little bit more detail now, so we actually understand what it means when you say things like partner or, things like that. So for the first kind of three options that we mentioned, so the EU family member card, if you have a relationship with a EU national, or if you're a British, you're a Spanish resident and you're a UK national, and you want to bring over a family member. So this, what we're about to talk about, applies to kind of those groups. So who can you bring over? So you can bring over a legal partner. So that's anyone that you are married to, or anyone that you've been in a long-term relationship with. Okay. And that includes people that are civil partners. So if they've had, if they've had their marriage, or if they have had their partnership kind of recognised by the government, whether that be in Spain or in the UK, then that's considered a partner as well. Okay. You can also bring over your children, and you can also bring over your parents as well. And just to get into the non-married partners in a little bit more detail. So what does that actually mean? So if you never formalized your partnership, either in the UK or Spain, with a civil partnership, or with a pareja de hecho, or pareja estable, which is what they call it here in Spain, it's not the end of the world. You can still bring that person over to Spain, and you can help them to gain residency here. But the requirements are that you need to show that you've lived together for at least 1 year and that you've built a life together. Okay. So one of the most important things that you can have to prove that is to have what's called the padrón de convivencia. So it's a definite requirement to even apply for an unmarried partner, and it basically is similar to the padrón, but it just shows all of the people that are living in the household, and so both of you need to be listed on that as living together as well. And along with that, you also need to be able to show proof that you've actually built a life together. So you can show things like joint bank accounts, rental contracts with both your names on it, a deed to a house in both of your names, utility bills in one or the other person's name at an address where you can prove that you both lived, or other types of official documentation where you're both listed together to prove that you're in a relationship and that you're building a life together is basically what they want to see. Okay, so yep, so that's really important for all those people that aren't married but still want to bring their partner and help their partners to get residency. And the other point that's really important is that the relationship must have started before the end of 2020. Okay, so if you have been dating someone for several years, but you never lived in the same house, you never had joint bank accounts or bills, and you decide to become a pareja de hecho in Spain in 2021, unfortunately, you won't be eligible for applying for residency based on the residency of your British partner, because you can't prove that your relationship existed before the end of the transition period, which is quite an important point um, for making sure that you're a recipient under the withdrawal agreement. So yeah, so those are the types of people that you can bring over, and how do you prove those relationships? So if you're married, obviously a marriage certificate is the best way to prove your relationship. Um, the marriage as possible. And we would recommend that not to use a marriage certificate that was issued any longer than in the last 3 months as well. And if you're married in the UK, then you can request a copy of your marriage certificate from the UK General Records Office. Or if you were married in a different country, that's totally fine as well. You just need to request a new updated copy of the marriage certificate from the records department of that country where you were married as well. Okay.
Something
Um,
to note, I just reminded the case that Deepika was working on about the marriage certificates from the UK. As far as I know, I don't know if that happens with all of them or with some, but usually the certificate per se does not have the date where it is issued, or when the paper is issued only has the date of the marriage. So it is important when you ask for it to request that it is signed with date of the issue of the document, not of the original marriage, so the Spanish administration can also check that you are still married, that it's not an old marriage document from a relationship that does not exist any longer. So
yeah, exactly.
just one thing.
Yeah, no, that's great, and it's really important. And the other thing to mention is if you are getting documents from different countries or from uh, yeah, different countries where they speak different languages. All documents that are not in Spanish need to be translated, and they need to be legalized before they're presented to the Spanish authorities as well. So, for the marriage certificate, it's true, and then for the next few things that we're going to talk about as well, it's very true that any documents that are not in Spanish need to be translated and legalized. Okay. So the other things that you can use to prove your relationship is, so we mentioned a civil partnership. So if you have the document that proves that you're registered as a civil partnership, you can also request that. Again, it's always best to have a copy that is issued within the last 3 months, so they can see that it's a current relationship and it's still up to date. Okay. If you're applying as a parent or a child, or to bring your child over, then you need to have a copy of the birth certificate, and obviously your name as well as the child's name needs to be listed on the birth certificate as well. And for those people who were adopted, um, or who have children that they have adopted, then they also need to have official proof of the adoption. Again, with both names kind of clearly listed on there. And yeah, for all of these documents, it's better if they're issued within the last 3 months with the date on it, like Marcus said, and translated and legalized if they're not in Spanish.
Thank you very much, Brad. Now, I think it is time to briefly mention a bit the situation of dependents, whatever they are, direct family members in an ascendant way, like Brad mentioned, which is uh, your children and your parents. It's important, for example, this system that we're mentioning here does not work with your brother or your uncle, for example. So that's an observation. Um, let's say that using the scheme to bring your UK national child, of course, being a child, they will be economically dependent on you. So on top of the birth certificate, which is naturally you will provide, either if it's for children or parents, you also will have to provide sufficient economic means to sustain them economically. And this opens up another question, which is, can I bring other family which is not direct in ascendant that are dependents on me? And the answer to this question is yes. Yes, you could bring, for example, your uncle if this uncle is dependent on you, either economically or physically, because of a disability, because of a long term illness, whatever the circumstances. However, the conditions that you need to fulfill and that this family member will need to fulfill in order for the application to be accepted are quite strict. And for example, they require a long-term relationship of dependency. And we're looking here at around 2 years of economic dependency, of monthly money transfers, of proving that you either lived together in the past and you took care of him, or you paid for the care that this family member was receiving. So it is definitely something that we cannot cover very in depth in this session, because it has another level of circumstances that are happening, that you need to comply regulations. But it is important to know that it is a possibility and that each case usually is looked at it individually by the immigration office. So it's a bit like applying for residency. At the end of the day, you need to build up your case. So you provide to them, to people that are complete strangers to your situation, a bulk of information that makes sense, first of all, and that let them understand your situation, right? Not do not provide documents from a lot of years combined with very recent documents, because that sometimes causes discrepancies that end up in rejections. So yeah, that observation as well.
Okay. And just to say, if you do have a case where you want to bring someone that is dependent on you or you're dependent, um, then yeah, you can contact the helpline, um, and we're more than happy to kind of provide you with some kind of one-to-one advice, um, because yeah, it is really dependent on a case-by-case basis, and yeah, we can check your kind of documents and give you some information and about what we think would be good documents to provide. So you can contact our helpline on +34 932 209741. And we're currently have reduced hours on the helpline, so we're only open from 11 a.m. till 3 a.m. Monday to Friday, and that's Spanish mainland time. So for anyone that's in the UK or in the Canary Islands, that's 10 a.m. Until 2 p.m. They will open, but for Spanish mainland, it's 11 a.m. To 3 p.m. Or you can send us an email to residency@ageinspain.org as well, and we're more than happy to help you and answer any questions that you might have about that.
Yeah. And talking about questions, we have one question from Christine Elliott, who is asking, "Hi, are you able to do a session on the non-lucrative visa process post-Brexit for UK nationals? What documents are required and the whole process? Thank you." Well, Christine, thank you for sending in your comment. The answer is that yes, we will do a session in the future about several visa regimes. And we will publish very soon a guide, a full complete guide on the non-lucrative visa. We currently have one available in our website, but it is a bit outdated, and we are revamping all those visa guides to give a better understanding of what you can and you can't do with those visas, uh, what's the real cost behind them, etc., etc. So yeah, in short, the answer is yes. Very soon, we will publish more information about it. If there are any more questions, feel free to send your comments. And remember that this whole session, if you arrived late, will be uploaded to our Facebook page, and you will be able to rewatch it like a video, like a normal video later, another day. Brad, yeah.
So, one thing that we haven't discussed yet, and I know that people probably know about kind of the process of applying for residency already, but I would just like to briefly touch on again kind of what are the requirements for residency in Spain, because although if you are a UK national and you're a Spanish resident, you can bring your family members over, but they still do have to meet the same requirements as anybody else that's applying for residency in Spain. So, just to remind everybody what those requirements are. So, you need to be able to show that you yourself, as the person who's trying to come over to Spain that's not a resident, you can show that you have sufficient means to support yourself when you're in Spain. Or alternatively, the person who's already a resident in Spain can show that they have the means to support you whilst you'll be living in Spain as well. So it can be either one of the two people showing that they have the means to support that person. And remember that if you're trying to bring over like more than one family member, so let's say you're trying to bring over 2 or 3 children, that you need to meet the sufficient means for each of those individuals. So you have to show enough money. You have to show that you have enough money or a job or you're self-employed, um, and that you have the kind of means to support like each of those individual people as well. Okay, so as you're probably aware, if you've applied for residency yourself, the documents that you need to present to prove that do depend on your employment situation. Um, and if you want more information about that, just get in touch with us directly so we can tell you exactly what's going to be the best documentation to present for your situation to show that you have sufficient means.
Yep, do not hesitate at all on contacting us through the phone or the email that are displayed in the screen. And let's continue with some questions, Brad, because we have a couple more. Julie Wilwright is asking, I am interested in bringing over my parents to Spain. I am a UK national and resident in Spain. I'm very interested in learning what documentation is required to complete the case. We've been talking a bit through it, but I think we can give you a bit of a shopping list of what you will need. Probably the best is any way that you contact us so we can send it by email, so you have somewhere where you can consult it repeatedly, because it's quite a long one. But in short, you will need, first of all, your residency certificate, because your parents will have to come to Spain and apply for residency from Spain. Remember that any third country national, including the UK nationals, can come to Spain without any visa for 90 days. So that would be the period where your parents would be applying. And once you start your application, remember that you are legally able to stay in Spain until the process is complete. So you shouldn't worry about overstaying or anything like that. You will need this residency certificate that they will need to present a copy. They will need, of course, their passport. They will need the residency form, which is the EX20. And in this form, they will need to tick the option family member of a UK national included in the previous sections, and then they will have to write your passport and some other information. They will need, in this case, because they are your parents, the birth certificate. Okay, and this certificate will need to be translated to Spanish by a certified translator and legalized, which normally you can do at the consulate. That's the most important document, because it's what proves the kinship, right? It's called this way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Apart from that, they will need to provide the typical sufficient means in case they are presenting their own economic means, if they can sustain themselves. If they are applying as your dependents, you, as their daughter, will have to present sufficient economic means on their behalf. But I presume that they are applying on their own. That's pretty much it. Everything else goes mostly like a normal residency process for any other
And
UK national under the scope of the withdrawal agreement.
don't forget that they need to prove healthcare coverage as well.
You're absolutely
Um,
right. You're
yeah.
absolutely right. Yeah.
So there's two ways that you can prove healthcare coverage. So either by showing that you have the right to access the public healthcare system in Spain, and if your parents are UK state pensioners, then they can request the S1 form from the NHS Overseas Healthcare Team, and that gives them the right to access the public healthcare system in Spain. If they don't want to go down that route, then they can also get private health insurance, but they need to make sure that it's the same level of coverage as the Spanish public system, and it can't include co-payments or excess copagos in Spanish. Yeah, because otherwise that's not going to be accepted by the
Yeah.
government as well.
Exactly, it should be equivalent to the Spanish health coverage, which this can be very easily achieved with this S1 form. So we encourage, if they are pensioners, UK state pensioners, very easy. You request it and you forget about this area of the application.
Exactly.
Giorgio asked a similar question about bringing in his wife. You have the TIE, and I presume that this TIE is, of course, the one under the scope of the withdrawal agreement, with which it is makes your wife also under the scope of the withdrawal agreement. So yes, you can bring in your wife without a problem. The application is the same as we described before, but in this case, instead of a birth certificate, what you will need is a marriage certificate. That's it.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
all the other stuff, sufficient means, healthcare, in this case, it will have to be private, unless she has already an employment contract here, which it's quite difficult now that UK nationals are not allowed to work without a work permit. So most likely it will be private health insurance.
Yeah. But
Um,
but please do get in touch with us because like I mentioned before, depending on where your wife is from, it may be a slightly different form that she needs to fill out. So if you get in touch with us, we can tell you exactly which one. But just to briefly mention, so if you are completing the EU family member card application, then it's the EX19 form that you need to use for the first part with the immigration office. If you are a British person and you're trying to bring over another British family member, it's the EX20 form, like we just mentioned in the case of the person that asked the question, their parents. And if you are bringing over a family member who's not um, an EU national or British, a third country national, then it's going to be the EX21 form that you need to use for the first part of the process with the immigration office as well. So if you get in touch with us and let us know which one of those categories that your wife falls into, then we can even send you a copy of the form and an English translation as well to help you complete it correctly too.
Exactly. Get in touch with us because we will send you an email with all the links, everything written step by step. So the process will be as streamlined as it can be. One last comment from Julie. She asked, if the birth certificate is in Spanish, I was born on Chile, does it still need to be legalized? The answer is yes. What doesn't need is to be translated because it was already issued in Spanish, but since it is from another country, it needs to be legalized. I believe, I'm not sure, but I think Chile is within the Hague Convention, so you can use the Hague Apostille which is a much faster, easier process for legalizing documents. That there are many countries included in this convention, so probably that's the way to go for you. If it's not included and I made a mistake, then usually the consulate will do the legalization, no problem.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of questions, that's it. Do we have any other points, Brad, that we want to go through? Anything that we might have forgotten?
I don't think so. So I would just say that, like, yeah, if it's an immediate family member, so child, parent, or spouse or partner, um, as long as you can meet the requirements for residency and you yourself are a British national that's a Spanish resident with a TIE covered under the withdrawal agreement, you should be able to bring them over. And like we said, don't despair if you're moving to Spain in 2021 or 2022 and you plan to bring your family members over, because there's still ways to go about it. It's not as it's not as I don't want to say easy, but it's not as a simple process as the current system. But you still have options, and you can still try to bring them over as well. So yeah, so don't despair. Um, and yeah, like we've been saying the whole way through, with situations like this, it is better if you can contact us directly, just so we can find out your circumstances, and then we'll be able to provide you with the most kind of accurate and up to date information relating to you and your family member as well. And the other thing just to mention is that if you still have your green residence certificate, so either the A4 size green piece of paper or the small credit card size ones, we are still we highly recommend that you change it over to the TIE if you haven't done so yet. And yeah, you can get in touch with us to find out exactly all the details of those. But yeah, we're following kind of the statement released from the Spanish and British governments that's encouraging all UK nationals to make the change over to the TIE. And yeah, there's a few reasons why it's a good idea. One being that the TIE is a proper plastic card similar to a driver's license, which you can use as a form of ID. Um, the second reason is that it actually states on the TIE that your rights are guaranteed under withdrawal agreement. And they also have a validity date on them as well. So if you've lived in Spain for 5 years or less, you're considered a temporary resident, and the card will be valid for 5 years. And if you've lived in Spain for 10 years, for 5 years or more, then the card will be valid for 10 years. Yeah, so it's the best document that you can have. Yeah, to prove that your rights are guaranteed under the withdrawal agreement. So if you haven't done that yet, or you know someone who hasn't done that, please encourage them to get in touch with us, and we can help you through that process.
One last question, and with this we will end the session. Comes from Duncan, who explains that I work for an international company. I'm a British national, and I have been told by my company that they give me a Spanish contract. So will that help us to get residency? Well, it depends. If you did come to live to Spain before the end of 2020, so if you've been living before the end of 2020 in Spain and you are still no resident but you need to apply, it can help because you will be under the scope of the withdrawal agreement, and this contract can help you for the sufficient economic means as well as for the healthcare coverage, because when you are working in Spain, you're contributing towards the social security, so you would be covered. It is different if you came in 2021. In this case, you directly do not have permission to work in Spain, and instead you will have to go through the working visa option, which also requires a document issued from your company. I hope this information helps. And I also shared in the chat the link to our inquiry form, because I know that each case is a whole world and it has its own complexities. So probably the best thing to do is to contact us directly, write us, explain us with all detail about your case, and this way we, our staff and our volunteers, will be able to work on your case and provide you a definite answer written down, so you will be able to have it in front of you to consult it whenever you need it. It will be much better. So, with all this said, I think that we can finish the session. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching, sending in your questions. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Brad, for explaining in such a good way all the different roads that someone can take to bring their family members to Spain. And we will be publishing in our social media future events. We will publish new guides. We are constantly trying to find new content that might be of interest to UK nationals and English speakers from other countries also living in Spain. So see you next time.
Thank you.